Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, greetings. What a beautiful fall afternoon in which we are recording this Fun Chat. And this is number 108 in our series of Fun Chats. And some of you have followed us faithfully since number 1, and others are just joining in. So welcome. We're thankful that all of you want to learn more about the history of the 1950s from our guests. Jackie, take us from there.
Okay, but I'd like to also punctuate that we have been doing this for 2 years, and this week is the anniversary of 2 years. So thank you all for your viewing, and thank you to the past guests. All righty, so right now we need to see that little banner down on the bottom. I don't see it.
Okay, I'll bring it up.
Coming. Okay, while she's getting the little banner, there it is. We want you to go to While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America, and then, no, back up, whilethewindmillwatched.com. Okay, so there you'll find everything about the book and the author. Well, not everything about the authors, but something about the authors, the vendors, and also the 1950s Fun Chat. You'll see all of the previous ones should you care to click on there. Also in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a beautiful North Dakota sunset, which wraps around our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And you'll see the little dot there, that white dot. It actually lets you know that this little book in 2022 won the National Independent Press Award for Regional Nonfiction category as a distinguished favorite. So, without further ado, let's go. Okay, born in 1957, Dean Houghton currently lives on the same farm where he was born in a farming community called Maribel, Missouri, with the nearest post office being Polo. He's married to Geraldine. They have 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. He was educated in a one-room school for grades 1 through 8. This was in Maribel, and he attended the J.C. Penney High School in Hamilton, Missouri, and the University of Missouri School of Journalism and College of Agriculture. His journalism work began in high school and ended January 1st of 2023. His 50-year career included working for successful farming and farm journal magazines as a livestock editor, and then 24 years as Corn Belt editor for the Furrow magazine. Dean is currently farming, which involves sheep, cattle, hay, and row crops. Dean, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes. Hi, Dean.
Hi. Hi. So as I read through the information that you had sent to me, this first question arose. Since J.C. Penney originated in Kemmerer, Wyoming, how did the high school you attend in Missouri happen to have that name?
Well, J.C. Penney actually was born in a log cabin just about a mile north of Marble, Missouri. We call it Marble.
Marble, pardon me.
Well, it's pronounced different ways, but it's actually the Italian word mirabile. But everybody here growing up said it was an Indian word, but it's not. It's not Native American.
Okay.
So, but anyway, J.C. Penney was born in his father was a traveling minister, Baptist minister, and he was born in a little log cabin just north of Marble. And at 3 years of age, 2.5 years of age, they got an assignment to go to Hamilton, Missouri, where his father was involved in one of the churches, maybe more than one, maybe riding a circuit. And so that's where J.C. Penney grew up, and then he came back and established a store here after his success in Wyoming. He actually failed a number of times before he found success in Wyoming. And then he came back to establish a store in Hamilton once he was already, making lots of money. But one of the interesting things about JC is that he was a huge fan of livestock, and he had a number of farms right here around Hamilton, between Hamilton and Nettleton, Missouri, and also a farm down by Columbia, Missouri. Known for Angus cattle, Guernsey cattle, and sheep, hogs. I mean, he had it all, and he loved livestock.
Huh. Well, amazing. We didn't realize we would be learning about J.C. Penney, but I'm glad to hear about it. That's one of the nice things about this fun chat. We just are learning all the time. We enjoy that. So many people engaged in rural lifestyle are familiar with the 3 magazines with which you were once affiliated. The Farm Journal, which was established in 1877 by a Quaker farmer, the Furrow in 1895, and the Successful Farming in 1902. So to what do you attribute their successful longevity?
Well, the magazine business in that era, that was the golden age of agricultural publishing. An individual with a vision, the way he reached rural America was using rural free delivery, RFD delivery, right, which allowed magazines to be delivered to individual farmers. It's first time in the world that had been done, was RFD delivery. And so that allowed at a reasonable cost to reach millions and millions of farmers.
Sure.
At that time, one of my heroes growing up was Abraham Lincoln. And in my work at the Furrow, I was allowed to do a 6-page feature on Abraham Lincoln called Abe Lincoln Farmed Here. And Abraham Lincoln's contributions to this era of agriculture were many, including the establishment of the USDA. And Abraham Lincoln's number one goal in life, more than anything else, was to be recognized as a great farmer. He owned farmland in Indiana, Illinois, and 2 farms in Iowa. Even though he never stepped foot on his 2nd farm in western Iowa, he was assassinated 2 days after he received the deed to that land. But the point I'm getting at is when Abraham Lincoln decided he might want to make a run for president, he was advised, you've got to go out and talk to farmers. You'll never get elected without the farm vote. They represent such a high percentage of the population. Of course, that's totally turned around now. They represent almost nothing, less than 2% of commercial farmers.
Oh.
So that's completely turned. But at that time, it was significant. Those people were involved in politics that you mentioned that founded those magazines. And they wanted to reach a large number of people effectively, and magazines were the way to do it.
Okay, so now these magazines are still out there. How come? Why? And also answer this: are any of these digital, so they can get the subscription online?
Well, they're all digital. Everybody's had to respond. I would not be the most optimistic about the future of magazines. Many have gone by the wayside. The ones you've mentioned, their advantage was they had huge circulations, well recognized. The advantage that John Deere had in publishing, see, John Deere established a magazine not as a sales tool, but as his own way of reaching the farmer.
And that was the Furrow?
The Furrow.
Okay.
Furrow is very unique in that regard. Yes, it's a company. It's not a company magazine, actually, even though it's all the advertising is either John Deere or its affiliates. Steel chainsaws, for example, is allowed once in a while to have an ad in it. But it's so it's very well controlled that way. But it's the reason it continues to be successful, and it's it's the world's largest publication because it has so many global editions. But the reason it's successful is it's still John Deere's number one tool for reaching farmers. It's considered to be within today's framework, is considered to be sort of a relationship marketing effort. And so it drives everything. It drives people to the website and so on. So it's had to make some changes to stay relevant. But it's I would say of the 3, the Furrow is by far in the strongest position.
Did you find that the type of people that you interviewed for your column in those magazines at each time that you wrote for them, or each decade, or however it turned out, that your interviewing skills or questions changed depending on the era in which you were writing?
Well, I guess my own experiences are such that I don't feel that I changed my interviewing technique. My technique was to listen.
Uh-huh.
It's that simple. You have to listen. And I believe that to make a good story, I'd say 95% of my stories, I was actually on the farm in the presence of the people, and in a vast majority of cases had coffee or breakfast or dinner or whatever at the table with them.
Mm-hmm.
At least once, sometimes more than once. If the food was good, I tried to come back at dinner.
Why not?
Sure.
But
So-
the point is, it's not so much what you ask. The people are going to eventually come to the point of they're going to start to level with you once they're comfortable with sharing information. And so the best thing you can do sometimes is not ask a question. In fact, not to really talk very much. Just wait and let the information start to happen. And then once it happens, it's surprising how I guess I hate to use the term easy, how easy it is to get information once everything's in place.
Did you often take handwritten notes, or you always use a tape recorder? What method did you use to recall the information?
Well, that's one of the key points, I think, of you have to figure that out with each individual situation. I'm not a big fan of sticking a tape recorder in somebody's face if they're not comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, with the development of the buddy seat in a combine, for example, or the buddy seat in a four-wheel drive tractor, you can do a lot of interviewing. You can get a lot done riding with a farmer, and you can't take notes, and I can't absorb it all without some help. So at that point, I just say, hey, do you mind if I turn this recorder on? And of course, it's all digital now. It's not tape anymore, but and 90% of the time, not maybe more than that, 99% of the farmers like, yeah, sure, turn it on, and we just visit. So it's kind of different. Of course, if I was going to go talk to an Amish community or whatever, I probably wouldn't stick a tape recorder in their face at all. So it just kind of depends.
Mm-hmm. With Fred and I find great joy in watching a lot of farmer broadcasts, farmer podcasts, what is being recorded now and many of those farmers are of the younger generation where they have that camera with them all the time. Did you ever find a need to do anything of any of that type of interviewing in your later years in the farm journaling business?
I did not personally have a podcast, but the furrow did for about 2 years, and just in the process of change over personnel, that has kind of gone by the wayside. But I did a number of interviews that were used within the podcast, and then really the more common thing was to have me come in and sit at the roundtable during the podcast and more or less deliver it secondhand, I guess, the information, and just say, we know you were out with whatever, and could you talk about it? And so that really was more of a secondary thing. And I think that's one of the big changes that's happened. A good reason for me to get out is as I was going through all this process of becoming a journalist, I guess you'd say, the whole point of it was it's not about you, it's about the people you interview. And now it's almost 180 degrees opposite. I mean, if the Hindenburg blew up tomorrow, all you'd see is selfies in front of this flaming balloon. I mean, that's all for coverage. And it'd be like, I got this cool selfie and it's going to go viral. And this Hinden whatever blew up behind me. I don't know much about that, but I got this cool selfie of myself there. Because I was right there on the spot, and covered.
So let's
universal.
Yes.
Let's back up to the 50s. I think that this may have happened maybe in the early 60s, but how did purchasing a $129 camera from Porter's Camera in Cedar Falls, Iowa change your life?
Well, that's a long story, but well, first of all, let me ask you, young ladies, a question, and that is, do you dream in color or do you dream in black and white?
I don't dream anymore.
Yeah,
Oh,
I rarely dream, but Dean, I can't recall.
How about you? What
Yeah.
do you dream in? Color or black and white?
well, black and white, and this all leads into this, believe it or not, but in 1950, there was a major study done, and 3/4 of Americans at that time, including a number of college students, were part of the study, said they exclusively dream in black and white.
Because that's what they've seen and known.
It was repeated 2 years ago,
Yes.
and only 12% of Americans say they exclusively dream in black and white,
Uh-huh.
and less than 8% of the under 20s ever dream in black and white. 92% of the time they dream in color.
Sure.
The 1950s were an era of black and white.
Very, very interesting.
But if you look, I mean, if you got Look magazine or Life magazine, the spreads in there, I mean, it's fantastic photos, features, all black and white.
Yes.
The golden age of television was the 1950s, all black and 100% black and white.
Right.
Your local newspaper only had black and white photography in it. If you go back and examine in your mind, I mean, what great portrait, if you think of a great portrait that was made, what portrait do you think of? And are you thinking of it in color or black and white? And, in my case, I'm thinking of Abraham Lincoln or, Einstein. And you think of those people in black and white. So the bottom line is I've had to become a black and white person. I'll eventually get around to answering your question.
But if you think about the Renaissance, those paintings were in color.
Well, they were, and but I don't know if I remember them in color. I don't know.
Well, if you've seen the painting, you may. Anyway, okay. Well, that's a very interesting observation.
Yes.
Anyway, well, I knew I was. My mother was a newspaper person, so
Okay.
she wrote the admirable items for the Hamilton Advocate Hamiltonian County paper, and so she called everybody in the neighborhood to find out who had dinner with who, and whose son went off to college here, and whose daughter
they wore.
And so at the time I thought this is kind of a waste of time, really. I mean, these are who cares? I mean, why would you waste your time writing up 3 lines that we had Sunday afternoon dinner with such and so, and a guest came in from Kansas City and we ate apple pie. I mean, who cares? And then the older you get, you realize this is actual journalism taking place. And the way I learned to do things really was from watching my mom do it.
Mm-hmm.
Her ability to ask one more question was just phenomenal, and that one more question is what leads you into the golden quote. More. So anyway, I learned that, and I happened to be elected reporter of our FFA chapter. They sent me to Washington, D.C. to go to a clinic on how to communicate and how to be a reporter and how to supply news items to your local newspaper, which I started doing as a sophomore. And then I picked up a chance to report election results for the AP and UPI from our local county. The guy who won dog catcher with 5 votes, I reported that to the Jefferson City, Missouri.
Good for you.
Yeah, not much, but anyway, so I decided, okay, I could do this dual thing with agricultural journalism, have an animal science emphasis, and then all my electives are in the School of Journalism. So I told my dad, I think I might want to do that. And his first question was, how in the world are you ever gonna make any money doing that? Is there any jobs in that field? I don't know. I guess there could be. And then the next thing I said, and I need a camera, because we had like a little Kodak camera, but we didn't have a 35 millimeter. I didn't know what a 35 millimeter camera was, but they told me I had to have one. to enroll in the School of Journalism. So we looked through the various and talked to various people, and I happened to stumble across this ad in the back of a photo magazine for Porter's Camera in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And they would sell a Pentax Spotmatic and a lens for $129. And I couldn't find anything close to that cost-wise. So I bought it, and Tri-X black and white film. And then I had to train myself to study scenes to where, okay, how is this going to render in black and white? Shades of gray as versus color. And so I've thought about that for 50 years, looking at scenes and how they interpret into, into shades of gray.
Yes. So you've analyzed things that you look at and put them in a frame.
I try to think about that way. If you look at the old, some old cliche movie of a movie director, they're sitting in the director's chair and they've got this thing around their neck, and they hold it up their eye, look through it. Seen that a million times. Cliche movies. Well, what that device does is converts the scene to black and white, so they can see what it would be. But I didn't have, I didn't want to wear one of those, and I didn't have the money to buy one, so I tried to train my brain to look that way.
Yeah.
And I think it did. Got along pretty well doing that. But that became a way of thinking, and I guess that's why I dream in black and white.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Tell us about a most interesting interview that you had in your career.
Well, everybody asks a question, and it's just like asking which one is your favorite child. Because even though I have one, I'm not going to tell them that.
Just think of one.
Or maybe nothing specific. Maybe the topic.
Yeah, well, I mean, all that kind of goes together. There's been, so many that you could talk all day long with just the interesting people. That's the whole fun of this thing is the interesting people. But if I do, I guess there's two things come to mind. One is when I was a freshman at the University of Missouri, my advisor, who was I couldn't enter the School of Journalism until I had 60 hours. So I wasn't in any journalism classes, but I was preparing to go to J School. But anyway, he had worked with me, and I'd told him my stories about writing some, newspaper features for the local paper. And he told the ag editor, Dr. Dick Lee, that I had done some of this, and, just in passing. Well, I got a call one afternoon. And they said they were really behind the eight ball because Coach Woody Hayes, the Ohio State football coach, famous Hall of Fame coach, was speaking at the FFA convention, and they had promised that someone representing the University of Missouri and AP UPI wire services would be there to interview him. Well, no one was available, and it just slipped through the cracks. And so I get a call from Dr. Lee, and of course my immediate reaction was, this is a prank. Somebody's pulling this up. But anyway, I recognized his voice. I think this is Dr. Lee. And he said, "Do you have a car?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've got a car." Did you go to Kansas City this afternoon and do us a favor? We need a, just 6-paragraph feature on Hayes. I said, "The Ohio State football coach? Yeah. You need to talk about what would he recommend for rural youth? What great things are going on." Well, I said, "Yeah, I've got a plant science lab this afternoon. I don't think I can get out of that." He said, "I'll call your professor. You'll get out of it." I said, "Well, I probably need a tape recorder, and I don't have one." He said, "Come to my office. I'll check one out for you. You get to Kansas City."
Okay.
So I did. I went there. Was the only guy there for this press conference with Dr. Hayes, or for Coach Hayes, and. But anyway, I just said, "Well, can we just treat this as an exclusive interview?" I mean, I'm 18 years old, I weigh about 105 pounds, and and I'm sitting here talking to this nationally famous coach, and he said, "Yeah, let's do that." He said, "Have you eaten yet?" And I said, No, I really haven't. So he tells his I guess it was his agent. He said, "We haven't eaten. Can you get us something to eat?" And they did, and they treated. We were sitting just in a corner of some sort of conference room, and somehow they found food, brought it in. He talked and talked, and nicest man in the world. And so that was the first. And I dashed back, typed out, a really poor story, but it was good enough, and it went on to fire services all around the small.
Oh my God.
And my byline showed up as a freshman in, the Gasconade Tribune and the Taney County Democrat and all these papers.
Gosh.
What a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. How did you get in?
Well,
did they give you a press card ahead of time?
I did not have a press card. I did not have a press credential of any kind, but they had called ahead and told
okay.
the people.
When you see this little scrinny kid, let him in. Huh?
Let him in. And so I had my little Porter's camera and did a picture of Coach Hayes and did this whole story. But nicest, just the most gracious guy you'd ever want to see. And of course, sadly, they got in a bowl game that year and they played Clemson, and a Clemson linebacker tried to tackle a kid and ended up running into Coach Hayes. Well, Coach Hayes kind of threw an uppercut at the kid as he was going back to the field. Well, this was on ABC, and they just kept replaying that and replaying.
Yeah.
Trouble, and he had to resign. And they're saying things like, "Wow, this guy's wrapped too tight. He didn't know what he's doing." And I just felt terrible because no one's ever treated me any nicer than Coach Hayes did. So but that was a great experience, and my name got out, and my parents were getting calls from people around the state. I think was this your son's name here in the paper?
Well, good for you.
Well, your dad might have changed his mind then about how you could make a living doing ag journalism.
Well, it definitely changed their frame of mind about that this was going nowhere. Although sheep farming and journalism are the two lowest paid professions when they come out, and I'm both. So it probably wasn't the greatest choice, but it's been fun. I have another one that I probably am more professional, and that is I had the ability to do the feature on Abe Lincoln, and to get that information. James Cornelius at the Presidential Library in Springfield, Illinois, let me go back, behind the ropes and into the actual collections.
Wonderful.
And here's Abraham Lincoln's handwriting in a diary and what he's talking about, and those kind of things. That's not specifically an interview, but the experience, you just cannot replace that experience. Hardly anybody gets that experience at all to do. And here was an ox, a harness made for an ox that President Lincoln had made himself by hand. So, things like that, just things you just wouldn't ever imagine being able to see.
Have you ever considered, or have you written a book about Abraham Lincoln?
No, I haven't. I'm not much on books. I don't have enough of an attention span to write a book. But it has crossed my mind that there's a lot about Abraham Lincoln, even as much as he's been written about. There's so much that people just kind of missed about him.
Yes, but it seems as though you've been able to get some information that others have not been able to get, and that's probably not in a book or an article.
Well, I think the information's available, so they don't care. Most people don't care about. So what if he wants to be known as plowing straight rows? That was one thing he had in his diary about. The other thing was, I guess about Abe Lincoln was that he set everything in motion for where we are today in agriculture. It was his thought. Well, if we had a national currency, we didn't have a national currency. You take something to the Gulf and put it on a ship to be shipped out of New Orleans, you had to make all these different currency trades to get back to your area so that you had something you could spend. We didn't have a national currency. He puts the national currency together. He said he was the first to indicate that farmers could feed the world. If farmers feed the world, we could bring in income to build the United States infrastructure. We needed currency. We needed hard currency. We could trade ag products for currency. All this stuff he put in place. He put together the United States Department of Agriculture, for crying out loud. And none of this had ever been done. And he worked with hogs growing up. Nobody knows that Abe Lincoln was good with hogs. It just all these things that had just been glossed over. He meant Emancipation Proclamation, and that's it now, in terms of history books.
Right.
He's now 2 paragraphs. He signed the Emancipation Proclamation and he got shot.
Right.
And,
Okay,
many people probably want to know, what is the Emancipation Proclamation? When they read that, that's so in past history that, like you say, they just kind of go by it. It means nothing.
Gloss over it. Oh, yeah. Well, history buffs would really, I am a history buff, and so I and others would really appreciate these little nuggets of information you have. Maybe not a book, just a little tiny pamphlet.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it'd have to be. And then half the words be misspelled. So, yeah.
Well, no, there's spell check these days.
That's true. Well, I'm sure AI, somebody will sick AI on this.
Right.
Book.
Yes. Hey,
I have one.
Oh, go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I was going to say, I have one other topic that I'd like to cover. And I've learned that Texel is 150 plus years old breed of sheep, which originated in the island of Texel off the Dutch North Sea coast. Tell me about this breed and how you became involved, please.
Well, I'm not really very involved. We are the proud owners of 2 young Texel rams at the moment. So that's the extent of my Texel experience. We are intending, of course, we're still primarily a Hampshire-based operation. We also have added Southdown. We have some excellent Southdowns around here locally, and they have excellent meat quality. We've been providing a few restaurants, local meat trade, and so forth. And the Southdown gives us lamb that's that at a young age gives the lamb very high quality meat, a lot of volume. They grow fast. Well, now we're looking at, okay, what could we do to perhaps add another element to this? So what about a Southdown Hampshire ewe that would be mated to a Texel? The Texel actually as a breed is double muscled, which is maybe good and bad. There's been both sides of the coin looked at. Double muscling sometimes becomes less tender. So that's an issue, but it's tremendous volume and the carcasses are beautiful to look at. In England, the UK has been breeding these for a while. And now as terminal sires, or in other words, the sires that make the lambs that are ending up in the local butcher shop, Texel's far and away their breed of choice. Actually, when Roger Olson and Sherry were still involved with us down here, I went to Holland and looked at Texels. But at the time, I did not think that structurally they were great, and it was going to be just so expensive to bring the breed in. We didn't do it, but now we're giving it a shot, and we'll see what happens. But they're really an interesting breed.
So is there a source of that breed of sheep in the United States already? Because I understand it came to the United States in the 70s, so something must be established.
Right. They've through basically 2 sources. The U.S. Meat Animal Research Facility up in Nebraska was allowed to bring in a set of live animals back in the 1970s. They studied those animals and then multiplied them and started to release them out as a breed in the U.S. So that's more or less the beginnings. And then the ability to bring in embryos and frozen semen, other genetic materials, has opened up since that time. And so people can bring them in primarily from the United Kingdom to add to what was already here. And so the rate of improvement in the breed's been pretty terrific.
Dean, how do you measure the life that you've lived starting in the 50s and then eventually getting into the Hampshire sheep business, and now and with Houghton, Hampshire still going strong, and adding the Texels? How do you measure that, the differences in what you've done to keep your flock in business?
Well, that's I think that's just all part of evolving. We have the only reason I guess that we really continue things is that because, you know, we had the desire to do it. It's not, I mean, the sheep business has never been a popular thing in the United States. It's never been the most profitable industry in the United States, but it definitely has shown a growth in recent years, particularly as we have a lot more diversity in the U.S. population. Lamb and goat meat is much more popular than it's ever been, and we've had to evolve as we go along. Now, having said that, we also are looking back in time to the 50s and early 60s. We're bringing in some genetics from the United Kingdom where the phenotype is much more like it was as I was growing up. We want to go back to as much as we can back to the true roots, of the Hampshire Down sheep breed. And that's what I want to do. I mean, this is all just personal ego at this point. It's not that somebody said they want to buy these sheep. I just want to make sure that we go back to where we were, and we go back to our roots, and that we more or less archive what we have done here on the farm for, you know, if there are future generations, hope there are, that want to continue, that we'll have something that we were able to build from, and maybe we can do the same for them.
I think in many cases, livestock producers enjoy raising what is pleasant to their eyes, what they like. And then you work with that base, that genetic base, to improve upon it. What you see in your mind's eye, that the picture of this female, this ideal female, or this ideal ram. And then there's so many other things that integrate into that decision of what you mate to what you mate. And that to me, the basis for even establishing a flock or a herd of hogs or a herd of cattle or whatever is, how do they meet your eye? And many judges will say that in the show ring too. This animal meets my eye. And so it doesn't surprise me that you want to go back to those roots in which the Hampshire breed was started.
Well, that's right. And I think the other thing that your comments bring to mind is the fact that as I was getting started, my older brother Tom had me meet with Dr. John Lastly, a geneticist at the University of Missouri. He said, if you're going to do this, you really need to do it right. And so I was maybe 9 years old and was speaking with the man who literally wrote the book, The Genetics of Animal Improvement. And so, but anyway, he told me, he said, you know, this is a marathon, animal breeding marathon. You're always looking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road as to where are you going to go. And you have to have some sort of a plan and stick to it. It's just, I guess, personal pet peeve of mine when you know, sometimes you go into a show ring situation and somebody will make the comment, oh, we've completely changed our philosophy and now we're really on top of the world. I just think, well, if you're changing your philosophy, you know, that almost is an admission that you failed. You need to stick with the process and just stick it through, is the way I see it. As to improve. I mean, incremental, small baby step improvements every year. You know, it takes a long time, but you do improve.
Yes, yes.
Keep your eye on the goal.
Dean, we're nearing the end of our broadcast and the conversation. It's been great. You really enlightened us about many different topics. Yes, thank you. In closing, tell me a fun thing that you recall from the 50s, 1960s.
Well, of course, I was born in 57, so my memories aren't, you know, super strong. 50s, I guess, probably early 60s would be more appropriate. But I think my favorite memory is the earliest one that I can come back to. And I don't know how old I was. Might have been 1959. But I wasn't very old. And of course, we lived in a house with no restroom, no bathroom. We only had one electrical outlet in the kitchen, and a lot of kids, and a hired man who also lived with us in a 4-room house. So obviously, Mom kind of always wanted me to go with Dad as much as possible, you know, to get the house cleared out a little bit. So wherever I was, 2 years old, 3 years old, he took me out to the barn, and I remember him stuffing straw down in this bushel basket, and he stuck me in the basket, and then he delivered a calf from a shorthorn heifer. He had a coal oil lamp that he hung up in the barn, the old oak barn, and he delivered that. And I remember that, and I just thought, this is amazing. He has this amazing ability. I never dreamed that, I mean, this is just something I'd never seen before, and I had no comprehension about how livestock could be, handled. And to watch this take place and watch this calf get up was just an amazing experience. And so I think that's probably my only experience from the very late 50s, but it's one I'll never forget.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Dean Houghton from Polo, Missouri. We do thank you for being our guest today. It's been wonderful. And viewers, we're so glad that you have had the opportunity to hear the story of the 50s, 60s, and even beyond that in more recently in the life of Dean Houghton. So Jackie, can you close us out today, please?
Yes, just a couple of things, and that is, viewers, look at the red subscribe button. Please touch that, as well as the blue thumbs up button. And until next time, tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until then, toodaloo.